week away from Ireland against South Africa, and we're a few days out from the Leinster-Munster game. Brian O'Driscoll is here. Brian, how are you?
I'm good, Ger. Thank you.
This is an exciting period where we get to look back a little bit and look forward a bit. We'll look at the Springboks game in a moment, but final thoughts on Leinster-Munster, which was traditionally like the biggest game in Irish rugby, but is now like first versus third. What are your takeaways from how everybody's been assessing the game and how the game went?
I think there's lots of good you can look at taking away from it. I think, first of all, my initial thoughts would be Leinster should be kicking themselves that it wasn't a 35-point scoreboard, not differential, but they left a lot of scores out there, particularly in the first 15-20 minutes. Like I looked at a stat, within 6 or 7 minutes they had 85% possession. Like, they just weren't able to convert the way they would have. Jamie Osborne got a hard pass off Cian Healy where he was all just had to catch him, was over the line. Jenkins was held up. These are all significant moments in building momentum as well, and getting confidence levels high. And fairness to Munster, they stuck in there and they showed the green shoots that I think we've been hoping they would, which we've been waiting upon. I think we got some of it last week against the Bulls. We saw it again in parts with limited strike runners, to be honest with you. Like, there wasn't much threat, was there?
No.
As much as they had plenty of possession, I wouldn't say Leinster were stressed and strained very often. But this like, if they are playing that, the brand that I think they look as though they want to play, this is just a practice piece. Like, the first ball that they took, Ahern took and played out the back to Carberry, they didn't get it to hand. And he juggled it, gave up a penalty. Luke McGrath took a quick tap, and Luke McGrath was fantastic, I thought. But Leinster should have had a score. If he hits Jenkins on a pass rather than carrying himself, which he should have seen, to score within 27 seconds. And that's the reality of it. Like, the level of accuracy that they're going to need to get to is still a good distance away. About consistently every time that pass going to hand, or 98 out of 100 of them going to hand. The first one in the game is a bit of a killer.
Is this years?
Yeah, I do think it is. Leinster, they had a really good footing to come from, and they also had, someone marshalling them at 10, which obviously helps significantly in understanding what way they wanted to play the game, and so many of them have been doing with Ireland as well over the course of the last couple of years in particular, and probably before that, unbeknownst to us, that's what they were trying. But it does feel as though this is kind of multifaceted, is a change of mindset, an ability to catch and pass, to put yourself out of your comfort zone and try things, and then on top of it, the calibre of player as well. So it does feel as though there are the green shoots that we were hoping for, but it does feel as though it's going to be a longer road than people down south would want to appreciate.
Because the response has been quite positive about the performance, and people are talking the scramble defence was good, and it's great that you've got a good scramble defence, but like, Leinster weren't playing at full Leinster and still were relatively comfortable from the first second to the end of the game. There was a bit where it's like, better performance from Munster, a bit closer, but like, Connacht ran Leinster close in the Champions Cup first leg game for a while last year, but the end was double scores.
Yeah.
And like, it could have been double scores. So I see everybody saying, and I see the point they're making, is that, okay, what Munster are doing is washing away a really bad era, and it's going to take ages, but it's a bit early for us to be, go lads, they could easily relax into, we're on the road here now, but like, it's a very long road.
Yeah, maybe they need to stop drawing comparisons to Leinster as standard bearers, and it's they're part of the next pack. And the reality is, Leinster didn't win the URC last year. The South African teams, they're beaten in the semi-final. Stormers went on to win it. So it's not like they think that the be all and end all. But yet in Ireland they are the standard bearers. But maybe they just need to look at where Munster need to look at where they can improve themselves, rather than go, this is where we need to get to. Yeah, it is, but
it's so far away.
You play catch up, and you get frustrated, and you take an eye off your own style and what way you want to play, rather than get caught up with the external factors. They only play Leinster a couple of times a season. Let Leinster do their thing. Munster just need to go about creating their own brand, their own style, and parts of it will be traits of what Leinster have been doing the last few seasons, and parts will be the Munster way. Building in. You want to start building in a ferocious pack again. You can't get away from that. As much as you want to develop your game, you still have to hold on to the core attributes of what you associate yourself to be. And that is uncompromising, no backward step, physical, good maul, good set piece. All of those hallmarks of great Munster teams, you still have to hold on to that and have that as the foundations to then build the rest of your game. And when we talk about it, that skill level piece will take weeks and months and maybe years to get to where they want to get. But they're going to need some academy players to break through and show the capability. The one thing I will say about that is that there were signs of that across the team.
Yeah,
and
the younger players who we've seen.
I think in particular, and it is worth mentioning, I think Crowley in particular, you'll always make mistakes when you're a young guy. But what I'd be looking out for is what you're capable of, what your rugby IQ is, what your athleticism is like, and what your desire is like on both sides of the ball. And what I loved about Crowley was he ran hard, really good footwork, but when he didn't shirk the defensive side of things. The clear out on Ross Byrne for a ruck at one stage was pretty ferocious. And you'd love to see that in young guys, because that's just mentality. That's not technique. That's nothing else. It's just bloody mindedness. And so, take all the errors out of things, because that when you're trying things, that'll happen. It's what is the rugby IQ along with the skill level, and I think I'd be a lot more positive from a Munster perspective, having seen his performance at the weekend.
Okay, and I suppose the other thing is that we stop comparing them with Leinster, but we do need to continuously compare them with what's gone before, and that's going to be a long period.
Do we? Well, why?
Well, because I think in a positive way, I think what we can say is that I'm not sure Crowley would have been picked by Van Gran in that game. He would have, you're a number 10, or Carberry's a number 10 and he's my number 10, and it would have been very like, who are the biggest people that I can pick, who are the most experienced people that I can pick, what's the least risky thing I can do here so that we don't get beaten by 30 points. Whereas at least with this coaching ticket, there's a change in that mentality. I think here I am arguing against myself about giving them credit for it, but it does feel as if we're only beginning to fully understand the impact of the Van Gran era. Standards had clearly slipped. We're starting to hear stories seeping out about meeting times kind of being, aspirational as opposed to set in stone, that level of discipline wasn't there, particularly when the Ireland players weren't around. Standards were slipping. So if that culture doesn't get fixed quickly, then there's going to be a problem. And I think that we do need to compare a little bit with that, and maybe remember that they're recovering from a really bleak period where the rugby was terrible, the standards weren't good, and the good players seem to be, not having any impact.
Yeah.
So maybe, that's why I would compare them with, that's the bit that gives me some...
I suppose one thing we have to not stop doing is comparing them with the successful Munster team.
The O'Gara team and O'Connell team. Yeah, that's gone.
It's gone. You've got to, that has to go, because it'll happen, and the cycle will happen to Leinster. They've had an extended period, from probably 13, 14 years now, where they've been consistently, year or two wobble in between, but consistently very, very good. League and Europe been competing at the business end. But that time you'd have to imagine will naturally come as well, with the cycle of certain players coming through in batches or not.
Yeah.
And so you can't compare. As supporters, you always will in your head, because you look at what success looked like and why you achieved it. But it is cyclical in every team. No team in rugby, even look at the All Blacks at the moment, even everyone has speed bumps along the way. Some, in their case, very unusually, and it must feel alien to them to feel the way they feel at the moment and losing an element of their aura. But the reality is, maybe look at comparatively to the team after that great Munster team, that not the naughties, but right after that, where they started losing a couple of the senior players, started getting a little bit older. Rog was coming to the end. But if you remember those last couple of years of Rog, they still got to European semi-finals when it wasn't really that great a team.
No.
And I think that's where they need to get to with this side. It's that's the mentality piece.
Yeah.
Because they don't necessarily have to have the very best players in Europe, but the Munster way is that you still deliver above your skill set, above where you are as a group of individuals because you have that jersey on. And I think that's what the expectation is with Munster people, with supporters. They're okay with not achieving success, but they can't have, what looks like capitulation or a lack of spirit. And I think that's why, we talked before about why Van Gran wasn't a good fit for them, because I don't think he wore his heart on his sleeve in his interviews and just never looked overly stressed or upbeat one way or another, with good or bad. And I think that's not, again, you've got to look at the way of the team has been and the environment has been for 20, 30 years, and how the people are and how they react, and you have to follow suit in some way.
It's understanding the culture and being part of it, as opposed to like, no, we're going to do it our way now because we know better. We
talked before on the show about Rob Penny tried to do that, and that did not work. So you've got to find a happy medium.
Okay, so Munster, long way to go. Some signs of something, but particularly the individuals are going to help multiply the speed at which this happens. People like Crowley.
Yeah, they are, and there's good young players coming through. Like, Hodnett's a nice player. Coombs is a good player. At 8, I like the hard running of his cousin on the wing. There mightn't be maybe of the standard of the international guys, but they're a level below, and I think they have scope to grow and improve and get better. I think you need a little bit more from some of the tried and tested. I think if you're looking at who drives standards, I think some of the senior players, and we've seen big performances from Tadhg Byrne in a Munster jersey. Pete more often not delivers. I think we need a really big season from Conor Murray. I think he needs a big season for himself. And I think I wouldn't usually be driven to the stats, but I just wanted to see the comparisons of Luke McGrath versus him. And I look at Conor Murray, and they had similar touches, but Conor Murray had 0 metres. Like, he doesn't, and teams will definitely start analysing that, going, he doesn't run anymore.
Right.
Like, when we think of Conor Murray, we think about this try he scored in Soldier Field, where he went inside the guard and brilliant snipe and score, and that was a catalyst for so much of the other great stuff to come. When was the last time we saw a proper line break?
Is that because he feels like he hasn't got the gas anymore?
Maybe, and trust me, I know as someone in your 30s, there's doubts around what the evolution of your game looks like, but it doesn't mean that you give up on it.
Well, you kind of have to do more of it then, don't you? Like, to see, just to make sure, like, keep trying until you have all the evidence. It's 100%.
He had it in his game. It's not like he never possessed it. I think if you look at someone like Peter Stringer, who was the best passer in the game, he never really had a break, to be honest with you. But what his USP was, he got the ball out quicker than everybody else, and allowed the back line to have another half a second. Whereas Conor's got a great pass, we know that, but you look back to the tries he scored. He's got a great strike rate against the likes of New Zealand over the years. Those 5-yard snipes, I just don't see that anymore. And
the knock-on value,
because I know that it's there, and I feel it's just a bit of a confidence thing with him, that maybe he's just gone back to what he knows that he's really good at, and that is as a passer.
But wouldn't that make his passing even better if he was to do it? Because it keeps the defence a little bit, is he going to? And then suddenly there's a minor hesitation, and suddenly your 10 has the ball and he actually has more time on it. So it's kind of this force multiplier. Yeah,
it is. And I think you have to be mindful too that, I suppose, with the systems that they're playing and the pods, I'm not encouraging him to carry the ball and try and draw in first or second defender,
not randomly,
because that actually is counterintuitive to what they're trying to do. It's actually just him having a snipe, having a break, looking for opportunity, even having, as he's running to rucks, looking to see where there's a possible mismatch, someone that is carrying an injury, just something where it would make you think, do you know, he's back, and he's multifaceted in his game again.
Because he's at that stage of his career now where he has been, you know, one of the greatest scrum halves that ever played the game for Ireland, and has lost his position in the Ireland team, but seemed fairly secure as the man who would come off the bench to win games or finish games off. Then Craig Casey starting in Munster, and actually Craig Casey's a bit more similar to Gibson Park.
Yeah.
And so you could see easily how they'd be like, well, if that's our game plan, that's our game plan. So we're going to go with the two guys who can do exactly what our game plan is, as opposed to changing the style for the last 5-10 minutes when we bring Conor Murray on. So,
but there's a security, Ger, with Murr. There really is. I feel it still as a spectator, having played with him, he still possesses that. He still has that unflappable.
It's calm. I've seen this a million times.
Don't worry, it's cool. He's part of that crew that have beaten the All Blacks 5 or 6 times. Like, with that comes a true belief in that individual, irrespective of whether physically they're not maybe as good an athlete as they once were. The sense of calm there is.
So we want that at Ireland level, right?
We do.
How do you make him feel that he doesn't need to go and then, you know, he's in that stage where don't try anything or try too much. You got to give him the confidence to.
I don't think he's not run the risk of trying too much, you know. And listen, he knows his game. He's still going to play to what his strengths are. But I think it's a little bit more of that sniper break that we associated with him when he was in his pomp.
Yeah.
You go back to the Lions tour in 2017, one of the best seasons that he had. He was a threat. And he's such a strong guy as well that, you know, his ball carrying ability is difficult to stop from 4 or 5 metres out as well. It's just identifying that opportunity. I wish that he had that back in his game a little bit more. Because when you do look at those stats of 0 metres.
What did McGrath get?
Like 87.
Right. It's a significant difference.
I know, it was huge. And that's why I wanted to see. And, yeah, like... And kind of the same sort of possessions. I think with Luke McGrath, Luke would have 60 caps if he had a little bit of a better pass. Like, I think rugby IQ wise, there's not many better scrum halves around than Luke, with identifying space, where to plug holes, and, you know, having a go at a break, offloading. His box kicking game has improved dramatically, because I think it was in the early days a bit of a weakness. I think he's put that right, and his pass, you know, is ample. But for international rugby, you need a killer pass, and I think that's the only thing that's held him back. But I thought, other than that pass he should have given to Jenkins in the first 30 seconds, I thought he was outstanding.
He's 29. He'll be 30 next February. Luke McGrath. Is it gone, or
No.
is there room now over the next 12 months for?
Yeah, I think there is. Of course, it's never gone. You know, like, is that pass a little bit ingrained in the international coaches' heads, that it's not quite the same as Conor Murray, not quite the same as Jameson? Possibly. I don't know. You have to ask them.
So the
only thing is, he plays with Johnny Sexton a lot, and that has to be a plus. And he is such a smart rugby player. He really is. Defensively, I don't know if there's many better halfbacks around.
The Ireland A game is kind of an interesting, what happens with that group and what level they're looking at, because it's like a step up from emerging Ireland. It's a better team, they reckon, than that we're going to face than the New Zealand Maori, and it's obviously the same camp, the same week, the same coaches, the day before the South Africa game. Looking at the injury profile of all the matches that are happening at the moment, like, it's, you know, there's, you know, dead bodies lying all over the field every game. The number of players who are injured and long-term injuries seems to be increasing. So there's every chance that if you're playing in this Ireland A game, that you're going to get some game time in the World Cup if you play well. That, like, you can catapult yourself into the reckoning to be in that kind of between 20 and 30, or between 25 and 35. You're going to get called up at some point.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a squad of, is it 33 that are going now? You're going to see more players than that used, for sure. They're going to be injury jokers brought in. And yeah, I you know, definitely in this A team, less so the emerging Ireland team. I think that is kind of giving guys, that's with an eye on 27 maybe. and the next cycle of a World Cup, rather than necessarily this. You might find one or two guys limping into the squad. I know Frawley didn't go on that, but he would have been the obvious candidate. I think McCarthy in second row. I think they've got high hopes for him as well, to see what this is a big season for him now. He's kind of edged into the Leinster setup. Now he just needs to put in some really big performances, and now he's got some stiff competition as well, with Jenkins playing well. So it does feel as though there is going to be the scope and potential for some of these A guys to make themselves peripheral players within a World Cup squad.
In the past, those games would have been like, it's the A, it's important for like long-term development, but it does feel a bit more urgent. It feels like they're doing all of this because they know that they're going to need a much bigger pool of players because of injuries.
Yeah, everyone's in the same boat with that, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, there's two kind of lines of thought with regard to injuries. It does feel there's a lot of longer term injuries, but it does feel as though in some cases that they're coming back an awful lot quicker. So the shoulder dislocations and that sort of thing, before it was 4, 5, 6 months. Now they're getting back in 2 months. So it does feel, well, I don't know, glass half full.
Swings and roundabouts here.
We'll go into the World Cup, even if we lose someone in the Six Nations before,
they can still make it back.
Still, other than anything catastrophic. But the game has definitely gotten far more attritional than when I played it, and you are seeing more and more head knocks, unfortunately. So I do think you're going to have the depth of your squad, and that's why the Maori games in the summer were so important. That's why this A game is important, because you have to know in high caliber games what these players are capable of and give them experience, because it's difficult to give them that experience in Six Nations. It just is. Those outside the initial 25, 28, very hard to give them. Throw him in for the future. It's not really how it works.
The prize money is too important.
It is, and people don't. Why? What does it matter? It matters. It's significant,
especially after in post-COVID when they lost so much money. In the Ireland A, Jack Crowley, is there a hope that he plays at out half and starts to put pressure on anybody else? Like we have this perpetual conversation about Sexton and his impact on the team, and just how important he's going to be. Like I don't know if you're paying any attention to the NFL this season, but the two greatest quarterbacks of all time have literally fallen off the cliff this year so far, and it happened pretty much overnight. Last season they were MVP, first and second. This season they're grand, but it was quick. So maybe they'll have a second half comeback. But
retirement, never go back to an ex-girlfriend or a house you've robbed, isn't that it?
Life advice.
Listen, until he's gone, we'll be talking about that level of importance with Johnny. But we do have to. I am nervous. I'm nervous about the reliance on him. And so, what does that make you do? Makes you really focus on who's next. Frawley, Carberry, Crowley now in the conversation, albeit he played at 15 last weekend.
Frawley also played at 15. Is this like, is there someone making a phone call saying, get them game time, I don't care, put them on the wing, put them at 12, I need to see them play matches, I need to see them play minutes?
Yeah, perhaps. And I suppose within a World Cup squad you will need players. So look at someone like Frawley, he's a perfect third 10. Plays 12, plays 15. Like that's your dream 30th man.
Yeah, he's
where that's and also personality wise, I don't know Ciaran Frawley particularly well. I'm sure he's aspirational, but right now is Frawley thinking I want to be a starter in the World Cup? He's not, and so because Johnny's ahead of him, Robbie's ahead of him at 12, Hugo's ahead of him at 15.
Yeah.
So he's trying to make that World Cup squad. So that's your perfect fit, where a guy that is thrilled to be there and supplement in different positions where needed. And I suppose Crowley has that potential as well. I don't know. I'm sure at a push, he's a footballer. He could play 12, of course. But now that we see him at 15, we know he's actually a 10. He's another one in that category that could find himself sneaking into a squad on the versatility card.
It's funny how when Ireland named the squad, the official press release has the 3 out halves as Sexton, Frawley and Carberry. Mike Lowry's in the back 3, so maybe he's not even considered as an out half.
There's the other one, Lowry as well, you know. Obviously, maybe he doesn't get as much airtime here, but he's very effective first cap, and can play 10. Will you need to see more of him at 10 this season for him to get into the squad? Probably. Is he going to go as an out and out fullback? I wouldn't say so. I think he's going to have to double up. But it's exciting to know that now we've got guys that maybe not out and out 10s, which is what we ultimately need, but now guys that could facilitate multiple positions in a World Cup squad, which is what you need. But we also need a guy to really step up as a number 2.
Yeah, Carberry had a brief cameo at 15 recently, but he is a number 10 really, isn't he? If we're going to play him, we're going to play him as an out half, and we're not really going to try and find a role for him in the team separately, are we? Or are we?
Well, I don't know. Is he a 10? Is he an out and out 10? Obviously, nearly all of his time at Leinster was 15. If there was other multiple 10s, would he still be playing 10 down in Munster? If Munster had a really quality 10, mind you, would he have even gone there in the first place if there was? I think he's a footballer, and it feels as though he's an ability to react to situations as a 15. I think I'm not saying his hand has been forced as playing a 10, but I just don't think we've gotten to see the best of him in Munster. In a struggling team as well, you have to put that into the mix too.
If you were his dad or his manager, what would you be telling him to do?
I'd be telling him to stick at 10 right now.
Right.
I really would, because that's where he's going to get to the World Cup, you know. And sorry, the other thing as well is Joey's closed out games phenomenally well for Ireland. He's kicked really important goals. New Zealand, a couple of times. Yeah. Remember his first ever cap coming on, you know, over in Soldier Field. So I think you have to give him a good bit of respect as well for not crapping the bed when he came on and finding the situation to be too much for him. Far from it.
We saw loads of 10s do that.
Loads. He doesn't make me nervous watching him, but it's not the same. And I think the reality is no one's the same as what we've got. So that's why we will be nervous going into the World Cup.
So what do you want from this 3-test window, right? Like the questions in the press conference are all about being world number 1, and Andy Farrell's like, well, why would we be scared of this? We should just embrace it. Like, go for it. I don't want to be number 2. And that's exactly what you want. But at the same time, these matches in 15, 20 years' time, we're not really going to remember the November Internationals, the year out from the World Cup. So what do they want from this? Do they want someone who plays a 10 in the Australia game? Or do you put Sexton on the bench for the South Africa game? You can't really, because it's South Africa and we might see them again in the World Cup. What do you do?
Yeah, I think, like we've been saying it for a year, guys have to get game time. Like, who would have thought Johnny would have started all 3 tests down in New Zealand? And he obviously wouldn't have started the third had they not won the second. But, you know, we have to give others game time. We really do. And yeah, Fiji, obviously he's not going to start that one. And will he be involved in 2 23s? I think so. He won't be involved in the 23 in Fiji, but you know, definitely, I think you got to start him against South Africa. You got them in your group.
We've got to try and beat South Africa.
I think you got to try and beat them.
Okay.
Yeah, I really do. You
so
can't,
best team, first team, whoever's in form, whoever's fit and shows up.
Yeah, I think you got to throw your best team at them and say, what have you got? Let's see you. You know, I think it's a real arm wrestle with them. You know, in terms of the psychological side of it as well, going in less than a year away, that they have them in your group. The only thing is about the group is, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Winning or losing
the group.
Yeah.
One thing's important is you got to beat Scotland, obviously, and the other teams.
Yeah.
But with France and New Zealand as the other quarter quarterfinalists, it's hard to know whether a victory or a loss is going to be your friend.
Yeah, like, do you want the French at home with all the hype behind them in the quarterfinal, having come through the group, winning everything, or do you want New Zealand with a defeat behind them and a little bit of doubt? I don't know. I think it's hell either way, right?
Yeah, it is.
We won't be favourites.
And it's broken bodies at the end of that too. That's the other thing. Remember, France in 2015 lost multiple players, and we came unstuck in a quarter final. So as much as you have to put all of your energy into a quarter final,
so then do you beat Scotland and not put out your best team against South Africa and try and get as many players fit for the quarter final, irrespective of what's going on?
Oh God, I don't think you can do that. What does that say to your squad too?
Well, I don't know. I like your hustle. I think everybody who makes that squad is going to be really good.
No, but I mean, what does that say if you're Andy Farrell and go to squad? Yeah, we're going to actually just pick and choose certain guys, and best of luck against the Springboks. But
maybe
we're saving ourselves for. Sorry, is it not? What's the order? Is it not South Africa first and then Scotland?
Yeah, so you need to.
You gotta. That's the end of that conversation.
This game then. So you pick him for the first game, but for the Australia game, let's say he's still fit, and let's say you won or lost, whatever, you've got to start Frawley or Carby against Australia.
I think you do. Yeah, you really do.
Like, it doesn't matter if we beat Australia.
No. I think it's the psychological victory of beating the Springboks would be significant going into the World Cup, because they're ranked higher as well. And Australia would be certainly no pushover, but I think you've got to have an ability to go and play with an alternative 10 in that. The fact that we didn't get to use one during the summer, we've got to look at starting someone and giving them the week's training. That's
the whole thing.
Important.
Yeah.
People talk about the Saturday, but it's having ownership of the team on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and then the captain's run and you're dictating play, which is such a difficult thing for any 10, knowing that Johnny Sexton's in the environment and the captain. So there's those factors to take into account as well, of just letting someone take the full reins.
Is there anybody else that you're particularly excited about seeing over the course of these 3 games? Or 4 games, really, if you include
I'm excited about the prospect that Josh van der Fleer has to be in the mix for World Player of the Year.
He is, isn't he?
He has to be. He literally has to be. He was outstanding in New Zealand, nominated for Six Nations Player of the Year. Did Dupont win that again?
I think he did, yeah.
And he has to be. So he's obviously been injured for a while. It's that. Anytime you've got an Irish player in the mix for World Player of the Year, you got to get excited about the prospect of what their performances might lead to.
Yeah.
We've only had 2 World Player of the Years previously, so
Dupont won, Aldrit and van der Fleer were the other nominees for the Six Nations, and then obviously in the summer he was sensational.
Yeah, him. Depending on what happened with Hugo Keenan, who's going to play 15? Do you play Mike Lowry? Do you?
Didn't see that, wouldn't it? Like, he's so dynamic.
Particularly in a game like South Africa.
Yeah.
Might work well to that Hugo might be fit and ready for that game, to throw Mike Lowry in there and see a higher calibre game than Argentina. He got his first test.
Is that the one that we hammered them in?
Yeah. So I think that would be exciting. I really like Robert Balogun. I really like him. I think he's a very, very good player. Obviously super quick, great footwork. I think he gets defence a bit more than the likes of Jacob Stockdale. So there's a greater comfort that comes with that. I think he's got a greater appetite for defence, like the hit, like enjoying the hit.
Yeah.
I always look to guys like that as well, that don't defend because they have to, defend because they want to. And that's really important in the overall kind of shape of how well-rounded a player someone is, that they enjoy it equally on either side of the ball. That's really important. The knock-on effect, the confidence that gives to those around them is significant. And I think that's what you get with Johnny above all the other 10s.
Yeah, you might talk him out of that for like the next 6-7 months and then bring it back in.
You can't take that out. If you're born round, you don't die square. So you know you gotta let him embrace that, and just try and not take anyone's head off in the process. But no, I think if you do look at the other 10s that are around, they defend, but I don't think they love it, and I think he loves it, and I think that's what kind of sets him apart, as well as obviously what he does in attack.
Yeah, okay.
Back to loving for Johnny.
There you go.
Every show.
That Ulster back row or back line at the moment is sensational. If everybody's fit and playing quite well, like they nearly have it fully perfect at this stage.
Yeah, I think the balance of, McCluskey's playing really well. Marshall is back in form. Hume there's talk of him being around this weekend. I think Lowry and Balakoon, those two are and if you put Stockdale on the other wing, you look at a fully fit Ulster backline, it's pretty impressive. That to be honest with you, has always been one of their strengths. I think they've always had good backlines. I think they've just struggled to get the level of possession, and now with the couple of the signings, with Sutherland and now Kishoff, I don't know whether Sutherland will still be there at that point, or Kishoff plays on the loose as well as Sutherland, so whether it's one or the other. But I think that those sort of signings would excite you if you were an Ulster fan.
It's a long way away, but
it is. But I think knowing that that's coming too, I think it's
true. It's
very
good
healthy,
for recruitment.
And I think they've got the Ray brothers are good. Timney's going well. Vermeulen definitely in the December of his career, but there's some. They're actually in the mix. They're rightly in the mix, not just for URC, but they could. They'll be. Feel like they could be quarter-finalists for sure in Europe, and possible semi-finalists if they continue on the trajectory they're going on.
And at that stage, it's whoever has the most good fit players should still be standing. Right, Rugby and Off the Ball is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. I want to throw one last random thing at you. We had Keith Wood on OTB AM during the week, talking largely about the existential crisis that the game has at the moment, from the player welfare perspective, the various injuries, the knock-on impact that we're seeing from the financial crisis in England, and how will that be contained? What are the kind of the rest of it? And taking that and the laws and how long the game is taken and how slow and it's not a great product for people, the wild suggestion of turning the 15 game into 12 aside to at least examine the prospect and to talk about the possibilities of it. As a thought experiment, it certainly would begin to answer some of the issues. Now, you keep the scrum and you keep line out, so it's not rugby league.
We've taken the 50-22, we've got the yellow cards in there. We've just short of players going on report, which is being suggested as a possible option as well. So it does feel as though it's morphing more and more into rugby league. So the last thing you want to do is take three players in a game that has existed for 130 years, 40 years, to then all of a sudden reduce the numbers. I suppose, looking at it positively, creation of more space, body shapes will probably change in players. It'll be less attritional,
less expense,
I suppose too. Yeah, I don't know. It's
too big a leap for you?
It is at the moment. We've got to try and find other ways and means to deal with the struggles of the game, and they're significant, don't get me wrong. The Premiership obviously is is evident for everyone to see. Losing two clubs, particularly a club like Wasps, the magnitude, the history of them, that really is, there was a sucker punch for the game, not just for the Premiership. There's a couple of other clubs that the talk is that they're in financial trouble. So will it be the end of it by the end of the season? I hope so, but maybe not.
Right.
It does feel like there's definitely a bit of a reset button on the game in England. I suppose we've always got to keep ourselves. There's two aspects. There's the Irish aspect, and then there's the World Rugby aspect, and you always have to keep your house in order. And I don't know the specifics around the financials of the IRFU right now, but I know that some of that CVC money that was going to go into the investment of the game has gone to propping up the national team and players throughout COVID. The repercussions of COVID are still being felt, not just because everyone's back. It's a thing of the past.
Yeah.
There's residuals from that. I suppose on top of things now, you've got professional contracts coming on stream for the women's game, which is all important as well. So there's an extra onus, financially on the IRFU. So it does feel as though we first and foremost need to manage what's going on here and make sure our house is in order. And yes, there's concerns about what's happening in England, but that's their problem. I suppose World Rugby's bigger picture, and it's not a flippant overnight, consideration to go from 15 to 12. But did we not have a 12 tournament 6 months ago or a year ago that was touted as that being the new IPL, and then it was poo-pooed?
That came from the wrong source, though. That was the problem with that, wasn't it? And it was going to be an add-on to the
it was
existing
and
game.
it wasn't going to fit into schedule. But it's quite a leap to go from having nothing to do with that to then having that as our new game. I don't know, I'm a bit of a purist about how the game has been, where it's gone, but you have to exhaust every avenue to discover how you're going to be a financially sustainable model going forward. And if that is one of the prospects, well, I think you've got to pay credence to it being a plausible, viable option.
So do the research on all of the available options. Like,
this isn't going to happen in 2023 or 2024. This
it's a decade away, really.
term.
Yeah. It always seems from the outside, not knowing enough about it, but that the main problem is the schedule is kind of all over the place. That we're asking the players to play too often in too many high-profile games, and sometimes they don't play in the games against the main rivals. That like the club competitions are too big, and there's almost too many internationals. But if there was a fixed number of games and there was a window where they were playing club, and at the end of that, all the internationals went and played international, it'd make sense.
It would, and I think you've got to. Do you have a better product commerciality in that than you do now? I suppose they're the questions that need answering. It's all to do with commercial model and the money that comes from it to then pay the subsequent components of the game. So yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of soul searching that's going to happen over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. Alan Gilpie in World Rugby and a lot of his team have a lot of thinking to do. They will not be quick to react to any of that level of suggestion. I've been part of the Rugby World Cup board for the last couple of years, and they do forensically look through everything, and sometimes it can be frustrating about how long processes take, but yet knowing that it's not going to change overnight one way or another.
Yeah, well,
also the development of the game as well. Like from a World Rugby perspective, you're trying to develop. These developing countries have parachute payments into them. The coffers are kind of squeezed already with where the monies are being put right now from a World Rugby perspective, and there is still too much of an onus on Rugby World Cup supplying
everything,
85 or 90% of the funding over a 4-year cycle. That's just a bad business model, and that's why this Nations League was touted a couple of years ago, albeit not with the input of the players, and that's why there was a backlash. But it does feel as though there will be a happy medium found where you find a better business model that actually allows the game to run itself year on year rather than reliant on a 4-yearly cycle on one 7-week tournament, particularly when you put it in places like Japan that have typhoons or wars in Europe, terrorism, and so imagine
it's not straightforward.
If a World Cup doesn't happen for some reason, it's catastrophic to the game.
Yeah. All right, on that cheery note.
Thanks for bringing me in,
Brian. Good stuff.